My name is Carolyn Baguma, and I'm the Senior Community Program Manager at the World Reimagined, supporting our community coordinators. And I'm so excited to welcome you to our second installment of the Inspire sessions, which are our opportunity to connect with the community and share some insight and knowledge that will help you on this journey of discovery. We've got some wonderful guests today, but joining us first is the co-founder, actor, author extraordinaire, Gale, joining us today. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. I'm sorry I'm in the car. I had a meeting that I could not get out of, but I didn't want to miss this. So therefore, bear with me. But yeah, welcome. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us while on the move. We love it. We appreciate you taking your time. So I guess the first question to really get everybody kicked off on this journey is to understand, what does radical self-care mean to you?
For me, it has become saying no. It's a big one, because when you're used to trying to fit things in for work, things in for family, things in for friends, and sometimes friends ask you to do what your job is for them as a favor, just stuff like that. You learn eventually that you run yourself ragged, and you really, for me, my benefit was learning how to say no. And no doesn't mean that you do it in a rude way. I'll say it very, very politely. It'd be a very polite decline. But I've learned to say no and live with it. And some people may still, even though you're polite, some people may still take it in a bad way. And I've learned to live with that too. Because as long as I know, I've said I've declined for the right reasons. They may not align with me, with my time management. They might not align with me where I want to be in my life. They might not align with me creatively, spiritually. I've allowed myself to say no.
Well, that's really interesting. And I think what would be really helpful for everybody is just sharing a little bit of how kind of the World Reimagined came to be. You know, I know people have heard from you before, and Dennis Marcus, but I think it's really interesting how that ties into why we're talking about this topic of radical self-care.
Yes, because the World Reimagined came about with a conversation with Dennis, because I was brought up with a mother who had taught me about Black history when I was younger. But I was also that child in class who used to get in trouble for saying, well, Miss, wasn't just Florence Nightingale. What about Mary C. Cole? What about Ignatius Sancho? I used to get told off in school for bringing that up in a classroom. And so it makes you feel like this is meant to be just our secret, that you only talk amongst Black people about the realities of the slave trade and the realities of how Britain benefited, but also how we resisted. It just seemed like everyone wanted to shut that down outside of the Black community. And so when I first had that conversation with Dennis, it was the first time a member of the white community I felt had been honest about the slave trade. And I was quite taken aback by that. And then I thought, man, I've had a difficult conversation with someone that I never thought I'd have a conversation about. And actually, I do now know how validated I was about wanting to make everyone know, shout from rooftops about what Black people have overcome and why we are here and why we have contributed to making Britain great. Like, we put the great in Great Britain, as far as I'm concerned. And so I felt if there was a way that I could bridge that gap in any way and allow everyone to have this difficult conversation, just how beautiful could that be? And that's how the World Reimagined started.
That's beautiful. And I think it's the fact that you could have that open conversation and be understood is a powerful reflection, because I think that in itself, being validated, being heard, really helps in the healing process, especially when dealing with kind of this traumatic lessons that we're learning. So
most people I've heard who were white and English usually say, what I can't be blamed for what my great granddad did. And that used to hurt me, used to really irk me. You know, and then you think, well, are they right? Should they be blamed? You know, it's like a gaslighting, isn't it? Effect of, well, they're great. It's true, they didn't do it, but the benefits of what their great granddad did are still here today. And the disadvantages to my community are still here today. Therefore, it's very valid to have that conversation. Thank you.
I agree.
You can stop here. Thank you.
And in terms of kind of, you know, your personal journey, would you care to share a little bit more about your personal journey while you are on a journey?
Sorry.
Would you care to share your journey while you're on your journey?
Well, my personal journey was my personal journey with self-care has been quite new for me, because I am used to usually just running myself ragged and doing loads of things, and then I began to feel tired. And you tell yourself, as a member of the Black community, life's a struggle. You're so programmed that you're supposed to struggle, and things are supposed to be hard because, you know, you've got to work twice as hard, twice as long. That is so detrimental to your health, physically and mentally. It's draining. And after a while, you see people around you who are white and middle class who are just not working as hard and getting results. And you realize a struggle should not be a part of the journey. Yes, you will come across obstacles, but do not think that you have to struggle and somehow justify it in some way. You shouldn't have to struggle. You will come across adversity that you have to overcome. But just being in this kind of struggle zone for 2, 3, 4 years is not natural. It's not acceptable. It's not good for your body. And I honestly believe now, before I used to think my struggle makes you, but now I realize struggle breaks many more people than it makes. And so it's very important. It's very important to hold your hand up and say, I'm struggling. I can't cope. Why is this? Who do I speak to? Who do I go to for help? How do I allay some of this stress? It's very important to go, yeah, I may be a Black woman, but no, I'm not strong. Yes, I will cry. Yes, I am vulnerable. And it's very hard for me to learn that vulnerability is actually a plus, because I thought being vulnerable was a failure.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of people do. I think a lot of people think that vulnerability can be a sign of weakness. And I think you're touching on one question that I wanted to ask you about the challenges that we face when trying to practice self-care. I know attitudes can be one of the challenges, but what would you say are the biggest challenges when we practice self-care for ourselves?
Absolutely. And that's why I say, hold your hand up. It's fine to say I failed. The first time I went to dinner with like really posh white people, and they were actually laughing about their businesses that had failed. It's the first time I thought, oh my God, that's not a shame to you, because I know we'd be like in sackcloth and ashes, ashamed of anything that failed. And then they were going, oh my God, you remember that venture that was, oh my God, how bad was that? And you think, wow, the freedom to be able to do that in itself is it's so freeing. Yes, I tried, I failed at that, and now I am doing this. There's nothing wrong with that. And it actually frees you up to do something else, to be creative, to change your roles very openly, and not be embarrassed about trying. Because why would you be embarrassed about trying? That's what you start to realize. Why would you be embarrassed about trying something? Yeah. To the best of your ability. It's something to be proud of.
So what advice would you give your younger self about self-care?
I would give my younger self not to work so hard and to actually enjoy the moment. So when you've achieved something, even if it's just a drink or a cheers or a blessing, just really acknowledge it. And of course, I'd have to go, thank you, God, thank you. But I mean, really enjoy it. Those key moments that you've achieved something, because most of the time I was thinking, oh, on to the next thing. This hasn't quite gone as well as I'd like, rather than go, well done. From where you started to what you've achieved is a big step. And so you do have to validate yourself every little step you make, because that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I agree. Being grateful, because things move fast, our lives move fast, and it's so easy to forget about the successes and celebrate those. So before I let you go, would you like to share how we can kind of practice self-care while engaging with the World Reimagined project?
Yeah, I would say with the World Reimagined, feel free to sometimes take a breather and take some time out and let things land and let things absorb into your body, because there are moments of our history that are so traumatic and so triggering that you sometimes have to allow yourself the space to take that on board, and feel free to, as you're doing that journey, to take some time out and then come back to it, because the whole process is really like a cleansing process. And by cleansing, I don't mean you can forget about it. I mean cleansing in the sense of that you feel very free to now discuss it. You feel very validated. You feel very free to talk about our wins and how much we have overcome. And so feel free to take some time out to breathe and absorb and go, you know, what happened to us is terrible. And just because we might have seen a few slavery films, it doesn't take away from the fact that what happened to us is traumatic and should always be viewed as such. And allow yourself to be angry and allow that to process, to then you go, okay, we did this, we did that, and now we're going to discuss how we move forward. Because that is the aim of the World Reimagined. How do we discuss this and find a way that everyone views us, validates us, views our views about the slave trade with empathy, and we find a way around that. And that's why we want to embolden community groups in this space, so that we can give them something to run with. Because once the whole country, in our opinion, and that's our hope, is talking about it, you finally have something to run with. And whichever way you want to then take your community group, we hopefully have laid some foundations for you to build on.
Amazing, amazing. And one last question: what is your top self-care practice that you do yourself, other than saying no or taking time out? Is there anything you
I go into nature. I go into nature. Yeah.
Nice. Forest
Nature
bathing.
is a winner for me. Yeah, I go amongst the trees and I go for a walk, you know, just taking the air, and yeah, that's for me everything.
Amazing. I'm the same. I love it. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you joining us today, and see you soon. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was Michelle. I know that was a very quick and short time with her, but I apologize for anybody. I missed the beginning of this session, but it is recorded, so you can always watch it later. And don't worry, you've not just got me. We have got the wonderful Aicha Djalo-Balde, occupational therapist and mental health practitioner, joining us in a little bit to share a little bit more about how you can, you know, practice self-care and a little bit more of her experience. This is the Inspire sessions, and we intend to keep doing these sessions every second Tuesday, and we have some amazing topics. So please do sign up, do register and join us at one of those sessions. We are also developing a toolkit, so we will be making sure that anything we share with you in these sessions would be available for you to practice after our sessions. So now, while you have me a little bit longer, I thought we could delve into what radical self-care is. If you've never heard the term, it was coined by Angela Davis, who is an activist, a very renowned activist. And it's a framework for understanding that radical self-care is different for different people. So this is one of the reasons why we chose this topic. And I thought it would be really helpful for us to kind of go into it and understand the different types of self-care. Did you know that there was 5? So obviously our daily lives can really stress us out, and we can be in fair burnout. And we often don't give ourselves enough time to like just break away before we actually reach that breaking point. So radical self-care is the assertion that you have the responsibility to take care of yourself before attempting to take care of others. Like Michelle said, don't be afraid to say no. I know it sounds horrible, and you're thinking it's counterintuitive because life should be about yes, but it's important that we are reflective and put ourselves first at times. So it's essentially necessary to fill up your cup first before you can fill others, okay? So there are 5 different types of self-care. There's physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and professional. So I'm going to go through them so you can better understand them. So the physical, I guess, is the most obvious. When we think of self-care, we're like, yes, let's go and be physical. But So physical self-care can be anything from like Netflix binging to a day at a spa. So it's really not about the activity, it's about really taking the space to enhance your overall physical well-being and contribute to better mental health. So examples could be eating healthier, could be even wearing clothes that you like. I know we're all, or most of us are working from home, so sometimes we don't feel that we have to dress up as much, but it can really change your mood if you're feeling good and looking good. Taking time out of your day to, go and get your hair done, go and get your makeup done, it's really important. And I know these might sound really superficial, but they're really essential to maintaining lower levels of stress. The next one is emotional. So emotional self-care is simply the act of allowing yourself to feel your emotions for what they are, with little to no judgment. This can be really hard at first, and the more you do it, the better you become. So some of the examples of how this could be is finding things that make you laugh, complimenting yourself in the mirror, giving yourself kudos when you do something really well, allowing yourself to feel sad or feel the emotions or cry when you need to. The best ones are definitely spending time with loved ones, maybe reading or rereading a book or watching a show that, evokes positive emotions. I love to follow Good Movement on Instagram because all their content just, gives you the feels. So then we move on to psychological. So this is often a neglected area of self-care. And people, even like myself, really lack engagement in it. So it's okay, like Michelle said, to say no to extra responsibility. This is a small but effective way that can reduce stress. So other activities could be engaging in topics that engage your intelligence, like going to an art exhibition or a history museum, or going to one of the World Reimagined events. Being curious for day, making time for self-reflection. That could be writing, that could be that could be creative writing, that could be diarying, and last but not least, paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your attitude, and so on. So with our go-go lifestyle, you might be surprised how even doing these activities a couple of times a week can have positive effects on your mood. Then there's spiritual. So spiritual, whether you believe in God, in Allah, Buddha, or are agnostic or atheist, it's important to embed spiritual self-care in your daily routine. Spiritual does not have to refer to religion or believing in some sort of higher being. This is a sense, spiritual care is getting in touch with your inner human, spirit and soul. So this could be contributing to like a cause, or volunteering. This could be meditating. This could be spending time in nature and forest bathing. It could be engaging in positive literature and highlighting non-material aspects of your life. And then the last, but definitely not least, which I would say, to me, I think is one of the most important, is professional, because it's what we spend most of our time doing. So engaging in professional care, self-care is essential for people in workforces, but also people in education. So this can be, these next tips can be really applied into those different areas. So when you give your professional life balance, it lessens stress and you can succeed better in other areas. So one of the ways that I really like building my relationships is taking time to build relationships with my co-workers. I think about the kind of space that I'm working in, so really looking at your workspaces, thinking about your workload, and if you're like me and get caught into work, making sure that you schedule in breaks. But there's other things that you can do to take that level a little bit further by being a bit more reflective about what it is that you need. So one of those things that could be a factor in how you work is your behavior preferences. So this is something that you could easily do right now. If you just Google DISC personality profiling, it will help you understand your behavior preferences and how you like to work with other people. So if you are looking to develop into a new area in your workforce, in your career, in your industry, thinking about how you like to work and how you are perceived is a really great way of helping you develop professionally. And it's a part of self-care because you're learning about yourself. So those have been the 5 types of self-care. So I would love if everybody would like to share in the chat which which of the 5 self-care tips they are practicing. I definitely think professional self-care and emotional are ones for me. But I would like to bring in our next guest, Aicha, who is an occupational therapist and a mental health practitioner, to share what self-care she practices. Aicha, welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Caroline.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. So what did you think about those 5 tips, 5 types of self-care? Any thoughts on that you'd like to share? Any that you're practicing?
Yeah, I think it's great to break it down like that, because sometimes we can be really good at practicing one kind and not so much the other. And I think for me, probably the spiritual is the one that I focus on the most. It feels like it's the basis for a lot of other aspects of my life. So things like meditation and other spiritual practices feel really important to start the day with. And I think it's really important to look at self-care in, when we're looking at spirituality, because sometimes the idea of self-care can come across as really flowery and, about it being bubble baths and, things like that. And I think there's a sense of it being taken over by kind of capitalistic ideas of buying yourself a coffee from Starbucks or whatever. But when Angela Davis talks about it, it was really about being able to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our communities and to better our communities. And so it's not a self-indulgent act, even though we are filling ourselves up, it is to be able to create communities that are better and growing. So yeah, I think, that finding ways to keep ourselves full, it's not selfish. I just want to drive that home, because I think sometimes it can feel like it is. I think
the natural place to land is that if you're like, self-care is that you're being selfish, and somehow that you need to give. I think especially community-wise, we can come from communities that are very like about the community. So if you come from communities like that, it feels selfish when you stand and you say no and you go against, what is your natural, one for all for one kind of thing. So tell everybody a little bit more about you, because I know who you are. So share a little bit more about your work, who you work with.
Yeah. So I'm Aicha. I'm a qualified occupational therapist, and occupational therapists are usually trained in physical health and mental health, and I work in mental health. So I work with a charity called Oblong, which is based in Leeds, Woodhouse Community Centre, and I'm a project coordinator for a mental health group that is specifically for Black and Asian people in the area. And the group's all about learning about mental health and learning about it in an unstigmatized way, and then allowing a space for people to provide support for each other. And my other role is as a mental health practitioner. So I work with GPs in the Leeds area as well. And I work with individuals and offer them sessions to kind of talk about whatever they're going through, whether it's anxiety or depression or kind of just day-to-day stresses, and finding ways to really cope with that. And then another thing that I feel is also part of the healing modality for me is writing poetry. So yeah, kind of creativity is really healing for me, and I think it's an aspect of my self-care routine. And then sharing it, I always hope that it's healing for people who hear it as well. So I guess those are my three ways of being in the community that I live in.
That's amazing. And kind of what drove you to enter the mental health space? What was the driving force? Did you always want to work in this space?
No, not at all. I think I landed there. I was always interested in psychology. I was always interested in psychology, and it felt like it was important for me to understand other people. But really, feel like I did it because I wanted to understand myself. I think a lot of people maybe who work in mental health often want their own healing as well. So it's always, a lot of the work that I've done with other people has helped me. It's always kind of happening at the same time. So yeah, I studied psychology, and then I went on to do a mental health postgraduate before doing my occupational therapy master's. And I think once I started, the first job I had was working in a psychosis team, and it was just a really interesting job. I wanted to go in every day. I wanted to work with people. I got to know people quite intimately through talking to them, and it just felt like a job that I felt I could do every day and feel that it was meaningful. So yeah, that's kind of how it carried on. It started with an interest in others, but most likely in myself, in my psychology. And then
I think it very much is what we choose to do or what we love to do says a lot about ourselves. And I can definitely relate. A lot of the work that I've done in kind of learning development has been about not only learning about myself, but like helping others learn about themselves, especially young people. I believe that in the quote, teach the young what you learned late. And I feeling like I'm growing at this age. So imagine how they must be feeling. So is there a particular communities that you find that you're working with more, or is it a mix?
It's a bit of a mix. I've had a lot of people that I've worked with have been from refugee backgrounds. So that's been a massive aspect of my work, kind of linking people who are new into the city, into communities and into social spaces. I run a walking group as well with Oblong. And that's been amazing because it's meant that we've been out in quite an informal setting. It breaks down the hierarchy between professionals and clients, and you're just chatting to people and showing them spaces in the community that they can access. So I think for people from refugee backgrounds, that's been really integral. And also being in natural spaces has been a big part of what I want to go into more. Michelle mentioned kind of being in nature is her way of kind of engaging in self-care, and it's been something that's been real for me. And I really want to find more ways to help people do that as well, and to feel that they belong in those spaces as well. I think for a lot of Black people, it feels like going out for a hike is like what white people do. it's like no, we should all be there.
I'm always on the receiving end of those comments. I'm like, yes, I walk everywhere. I think that was something that I only got to experience when I moved from London. I live in Brighton now, and in London, everywhere you commute by public transport, but like in Brighton, I will choose to walk everywhere, whether it's 40-50 minutes, then take a bus, because it's lovely to be out in fresh air and not be in some kind of vehicle. But it's also made me realize how little access I had in where I lived in East London to like really great nature, not these surfaces that you get. Like, this is like,
overly mode.
Oh, this is why I hated parks when I was younger, because they were crap. The ones I had access to weren't really nature. They were this condensed version of nature. And the more I get into it, the more, I love it. And I think that there is a lot that can happen, a lot of change that can happen, especially when you're out in nature, when you're disconnected. I think you can do a lot of reflection work there. You can do a lot of building. And I think the pandemic had a lot of people realizing how important it is to be in these spaces that kind of energize us.
For sure.
So I think just so that I recognized some comments about self-care here, one of the comments from Ade was practicing self-care and how I spend my time on professional commitments. I like that. Is that determining the kind of commitments that you engage in, or how much time? Also just saying like, this is what I'm worth, or working, I think we've all been there where we have to fight for, our hours sometimes. So being able to say this is what I'm worth in itself is definitely active self-care.
Yeah.
Asha, hey. Playing guitar, singing my self-care practice, much to my dismay of my neighbors. Oh, that's actually quite lovely. Create music from your self-care as part of your practice. I love that. If I could do the same thing, I would. I love to paint. Problem is I get obsessed and then I don't have enough you can only, paint like a state of mind. You can only do it at certain points. You can't just do it without the inspiration. So I wish I had more time, but it saved me in the pandemic. A chance to have an outlet when things were just really uncertain, and I couldn't, especially in the working world. So I was really saved that I could spend my time painting, and I was really grateful that I had so much time to paint.
Yeah, I think those creative outlets are amazing, because I think a lot of the time the things we experience and we try and process, it's hard to try and process sometimes in a conversation or even writing it down. And my creative outlet really is poetry, but even poetry, sometimes words can't really grab the essence of what we want to express. So, music and art and dance, I think dance has been a big one for me.
Definitely.
Finding ways to express where we don't have to use words or try and put it in a logical format, which I think, because I'm really interested in looking at kind of African healing practices. It's just, in a lot of African cultures, it's really embedded that we engage in drumming and dance, and it's just part of the culture. And I think that's an understanding of how healing works. So it's just important to, put on some music and dance and do that.
And sometimes it helps with even breath work. We might not realize we haven't taken a really clear, deep breath because we've just been up against it. And one of my friends said one of the good things she does is she puts on music, and because she's singing, and it's like a natural breath work. So because she's singing, it's much more controlled. And I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah. So sometimes when I need to just settle myself, just put on a song and I'll just sing, and it kind of makes me a little bit more present, but it helps with my breathing, which is a bit calmer in the process.
Yeah.
I wanted to delve into kind of reason that Angela Davis's radical self-care framework is interesting, because it's really exploring how our culture impacts our attitudes towards self-care. So I think our self-care attitude is affected by our cultures.
Could you say that again? Sorry, did you say how?
So do you think our culture affects our attitude towards self-care or practicing self-care?
Yeah, absolutely. I think systemically, being experiencing racial injustice in itself will create trauma in the body. And I think a lot of the self-care practices are about coming back to the body and reconnecting. And if we've experienced trauma, it's difficult to come back to the body, and it's difficult to connect to that space that has a lot of pain and suffering. So I think in a very systemic sense, the idea of relaxing sometimes, the idea of having no distractions is really difficult, because a lot can come up in that time or in that space.
Because we don't slow down.
Yeah. So when we finally do slow down, everything's coming up and everything wants to be processed. So I think in that sense, the culture makes it challenging to engage in that. It means that we're constantly trying to distract ourselves or stay turned on and not turning off. So I think that's why we need to approach self-care with knowing that sometimes it's difficult and it's not flowery, it's not like buying a hot chocolate or whatever. Sometimes it's really difficult work, and it's coming into connection with parts of ourselves that have been in pain for a long time. But the hope is that in that healing there's a lot of joy to be found as well. In our pain there's also our joy. It's twofold. So we can through kind of journeying through that and accepting that and noticing it and taking that time to have self-care in our routine, we can also access deep levels of our joy too, while living in a very, in an oppressive environment that does create trauma as well. Which is why, you know, the work that is happening with the World Reimagined is so important, because we need to confront these things, even though they're difficult, and we need to take care of ourselves while we're confronting it as well.
Yeah, I had a personal learning recently from my therapist who was like, you keep it moving, don't you? You know, things go wrong, things don't work out, you keep it moving. I was like, yeah, I just figure out the next route. And she's like, you need to slow down. She's like, you know, you can acknowledge that this didn't work and still be grateful for whatever did happen and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, because, you know, one of my mottos is we move, you know, we keep it moving. And I realized that was a coping mechanism for kind of the different things that are thrown at you, and kind of like not really taking time to process it because you don't want to feel vulnerable. You don't really want to absorb the pain. So you kind of just focus on the things that you can control or the things that you can make happen. And I think that's very much my coping mechanism. Is like, I'm always like planning and organizing. So learn just sit in it and also feel it and be able to communicate what that feeling is. It is a very powerful thing to learn about myself. I was like, oh, okay. I thought like resilient and adaptive. It's also just my.
I do the same. Because I think it's almost taught, you know, when there is a lot going on, you have to find ways to take care of yourself. And often we learn that when we're quite young and don't have all of the tools that we need. And then we kind of keep just engaging in that. So yeah, it's amazing that you've been able to like come to that learning. I think I'm definitely still coming there as well. It's like, oh yeah, I should relax, I shouldn't
being told that we know you could do stuff, just stop for a moment and what happened. And the faster that life gets and the more different hats that we wear, it's very easy to get just caught up in the grind and not take So it'd be really good to hear about kind of your personal journey to self-care. But before we do that, I wanted to just finish up on what we were talking about in terms of attitudes. Do you think there's been a shift in attitudes towards kind of well-being in general, you know, mental health and well-being in general, especially working with communities as you do? Do you think that there is a shift, or is it as it's always been?
Yeah, I feel like the pandemic was like a massive instigator for it, because it was just like everyone was literally forced to stop and to wait and to not be distracted by anything, and literally just sit. I think one of my friends said, like, it's all like we've been all put on like a timeout, like we're toddlers, and we just have to like stay at home. And like, you know, when toddlers go on a timeout, like they get to reflect on what they've done and like what is it that you did that was bad? And then you say sorry, and then you can come back into the room.
Can I go back out into the world now?
So we just all got that time to really reflect. And I think people noticed, you know, their own like toxic behaviors, because we all have them. We all have toxic behaviors, things that aren't what you want for your higher self or for your higher community, but you keep doing because that's what you've known how to do, and it's a habit. And I think people notice that, and so they've been seeking help to change it. Because it's not always easy to change. Just because you notice it doesn't mean that it goes away. It's practicing to make it different. So I think I know, even with like kind of like life coaching, because I recently did a coaching course with life coaching, there's been a lot of people who've been going towards that more as well since the pandemic, more people seeking psychotherapy. So more people really accessing mental health services before they get to the brink of things being really bad, but earlier, when they're actually thinking, I just want my life to be better, I want to achieve my goals more. And all of those, yeah, you know, striving for a better livelihood, not just because you're unwell at the time. It's a really good reason to seek psychotherapy, because a lot of the time we're not kind of reaching our goals because we're being held back by habits that aren't serving us anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's been a big shift in people being able to reflect and decide what they want to change.
Yeah, and I think it's been an opportunity for people to change the things, they've had the time, and I was telling a lot of my friends, it's like, relish this opportunity, like if you're on furlough for like 10 months and you just do itself, use it nonetheless, do everything that you possibly can, because when are you going to get a chance to do this again and be in this space again, so it's always really, it's interesting to see how people have changed. And I think the biggest learning for a lot of people was relationships that don't serve them. I think that's what I was coming across, because you don't have those distractions that normally sustain your social circles. And if you don't have that kind of friendship that can survive those distractions, it was a lot of people are realizing, one, they don't really like hanging out with certain people if they're not out partying or something, or socializing, and they can't really talk to everybody. Recognizing that who are the people that I can talk to really honestly and be vulnerable. And I do think vulnerability is such a powerful thing, and the more I'm vulnerable with people, the more we realize how much we have in common, that we share, similar experiences that make us just as vulnerable, and we've just been guarding it. And, I'm sure people have come across Brene Brown's The Power of Vulnerability. She was studying, vulnerability and had a breakdown while studying vulnerability, and she learned a lot about it. But I think it's worth watching that just to explore how it is that you approach, your failures, your weaknesses, or the things that you perceive to be weak.
Yeah.
So before I kind of move on with some questions that people can ask themselves and then come back to you, is there anything that you would like to share, and like any advice that you would like to share with anyone kind of seeking more support or wanting to start this journey of self-care, or just on their well-being journey?
Yeah, I guess it's just a lot of self-care is noticing things that maybe that you've been doing that are toxic. And I think my advice, and from not doing this for a long time to myself, is just be kind to the things that you find, and know that everyone has those things as well. And it's being able to know that you want something to change, but accepting that that's what it is at the same time. And it's an aspect of dialectical therapy where they talk about the two being true. So, I do this toxic thing sometimes, but I'm also a kind and loving person, and I am loved. Both of these things can happen at the same time. So it's just really important to cultivate that in the journey. And yeah, in terms of kind of resources, I think we talked about breathing with singing. I think accessing breathing exercises and finding ways to get into our relaxed part of our nervous system, so the parasympathetic nervous system, through breathing. So using apps like, they're all out there, like Headspace and Calm, or go into your local kind of yoga center, and just looking at ways to get into our relaxation part of our nervous system is integral, basically, for being able to start the journey in a kind and safe way.
Excellent, thank you for that. So if you're thinking about starting your own or building your own self-care routine, it's important to factor in those 5 types of self-care: psychological, emotional, physical, professional, all of those, when you're thinking about how you can practice these small little activities that can go towards the greater self-care plan. So one of the first questions you can ask yourself is, how do I feel in this moment? Not only physically, but both mentally, and just write down whatever comes through. You know, it might be that you feel great, but you know, you're exhausted. Physically, you might feel great because you work out, but you're mentally exhausted because you're also doing a lot of work and your workload is really heavy. So really understand how you feel at this precise moment, okay? And then the next question is, what am I most committed to and why am I committed to it? The things that we are passionate about, the things that we put our energy into say a lot about ourselves, and that would be a really great reflective answer for yourself. Then think about who or what inspires you the most. It could be a writer, a book, it could be an act, it could be anything. Think about what really drives inspiration for you. Then the next question is, what do I love most about myself? What are my best characteristics? I think we are in a culture where we feel like we're boasting if we celebrate who we are and what we do and all the things that we love. Especially as a consultant, I do a lot of different work. And sometimes when I'm telling people the list, I feel a little bit like I'm bragging and I'm talking too much about myself, even though people are really curious. But, you know, it's really important that we recognize what it is that we love about ourselves and what our best characteristics are, especially if we are looking to progress and to work towards some goals. It's very good to be clear about your strengths and communicate your strengths. Then ask what you are grateful for or thankful for today. I think this is a really good thing to do at the end of any day, especially if you're really busy and you just having something that you write down. I have a little notebook that I put little achievements that I've had so that I can actually look back on it, because believe me, sometimes I find it hard to remember what happened last Tuesday. So having these little records will actually show how much you achieve, even though you might not feel like it. And then one last question, which would be, what is the one thing that you can do today to help you achieve your long-term goals? So what's the one thing, small thing that you can do to work towards long-term goals? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember hearing that depression is often the inability to plan a future or to visualize a future. Am I wrong, Aicha? So I think that's why working towards long-term goals is like a really healthy activity to keep you motivated and to keep you, sails afront. Do you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think, and maybe in a concise way, depression is often linked to being stuck in the past or stuck with things that have happened in the past and feeling it difficult to move on. Like one of the main symptoms is lack of motivation. So just finding it difficult to kind of instigate newness and change. So yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it.
Excellent, thank you for that professional backup. Those are the kind of 6 questions that you can ask yourself. Don't worry if you didn't get all of those. We will be writing these up and putting them into the toolkit. And of course, you can always rewatch this session and the previous sessions and all future sessions, because they're all recorded and available on the YouTube channel, as well as in the digital toolkit that will be available once the world Reimagined is left. And I can't even imagine that world. I'd like to invite Aicha back on as well now to just share a little activity that you have for us that people can kind of do after this session for themselves.
Yeah, so this is an activity that I really like doing in groups, and it's a bit adapted. So it's a self-care bucket. So what you do is you draw a bucket, and then inside you'd put a water level of how full you feel at the moment in terms of love or self-care, and inside you write all the things that fill your bucket. So I would maybe write poetry and talking to friends and listening to music and going for a walk. I'd write all of these things inside my bucket, and then I'd put a little tap on the bucket, and on the tap I put all the things that deplete me, that take away my sense of fullness. So, sometimes that is work, or sometimes it's having difficult conversations, or whatever it is. Even like thinking, for me, things I find difficult is like even like thinking about money and doing my finances. That kind of, I need to plan something really nice afterwards. After I do that,
I need to reward myself.
Yeah.
I feel the same.
So it's this exercise kind of helps you to see what activities, say if you're planning your day tomorrow, you might start to think, actually, I've got a lot of depleting things in that day. Maybe I need to add a few of the things that fill me up a little bit. So it just kind of helps you start to categorize what is a self-care activity and what is not so much a self-care activity. And then trying to plan your day around that.
Yeah.
And what you could do with that is even just making a to-do list. Sometimes the day's really busy and you can't find a time for, I'll definitely be able to do self-care at, you know, in the evening at 6. But if you have a to-do list that's open on your desk the whole day, whenever you find a moment, you can tick off one of those self-care activities that fill you up. So yeah, just working with that knowledge of yourself can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think that is really helpful to be able to do a little bit every day towards figuring out what, filling up your bucket, but in a really positive way. So in terms of like, if people feel like, okay, I haven't got really any ideas of what fills me up or what is really interests me or what, you know, because we get so caught up in our work and a lot of the time it's so hard to have a hobby or an interest outside of work, which is obviously part of your professional self-care, having something outside of work. But what would you say to people who don't have that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of trying things out, or, you know, sometimes if I'm not feeling that motivated, I don't feel like I want to do any self-care by myself, but I might be more motivated if another friend wants to do it with me. So during the pandemic, I used to go on a walk with a friend quite a lot. We'd go out for a walk and we'd walk around the park and then go back home. And I knew I would do that because there was a social aspect to it and it would make me have to do it. So if it feels difficult to kind of think of something, maybe if you know a friend that's got a few hobbies, try out a hobby with them or try out a hobby with another friend. Just kind of like do it as a bit of a project. Try and find the thing that fills you up and just trial things with your friends, and it'll probably be quite fun. Even if you don't like the activity, it'll be a bit of a laugh because you're with your friend.
And you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone, you're being curious, trying something new, even if it's not something that you're really interested in. You're going to go away feeling really positive and feel like that was better than binging Netflix, you know, for the day. That never ends well. So one last advice. What advice would you give for anyone who wants to engage in the World Reimagined and how they can practice well-being on this journey?
I think, I think that it's important work. So we have to do it. So this, what the World Reimagined is doing and engaging it is so integral, right? And it will be triggering in many ways as well, because it's a traumatic history that we're uncovering and talking about, and the narratives are triggering. So it's being able to notice when things are too much, when you're experiencing a triggering moment, and when your nervous system has kind of gone into that fight or flight response, noticing that, and having those tools ready to be able to step back when you've noticed that, and to do some breathing exercises and find ways to relax again. So that is kind of your own self regulation system, but we also have our community as well. So if you've got a group of friends that are engaging in the World Reimagined, find time to meet and talk about it, because it's very likely that the things you've been triggered by, they've been triggered by too. And oftentimes when we're able to see that others are going through things, it lessens our load, right? So to talk about it and don't be afraid to express the difficulties and how it feels and talk through it. And then there's also ways of expressing that's not with other people. So like finding ways to journal, just writing things out, and you know, it doesn't need to be something that you share with other people. You can literally rip it up afterwards, or If you've got a
burn
fire,
it as
burn
like a
it.
spirit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
burn it in a safe way.
Sage it.
Yeah. So yeah, just express yourself. Do not hold things and push it down. And I say do
Definitely
not.
don't avoid.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm saying like do not, because that is my go-to of holding, pushing it down, and expression is so important, letting it out, whether it's with people on paper or movement, whatever way is possible. Share what you're going through.
Amazing. Well, with that, thank you very much, Aicha, for sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. We are finished. This has been the second installment of the Inspire session. Thank you so much for joining us. The Inspire sessions are part of the Inspire Community Program funded by Esme Fairbairn Foundation and supported by our presenting partner, Sky. If you missed the beginning of this session because we were like ready to go, you can see all of our sessions on our YouTube page in the digital toolkit. And if you want to know what our upcoming sessions are, please go to our website and go onto the What's Going On page, the Reimagined.org website, and you can also register to our newsletter to keep up to date. So our next session will be on the 17th at 1 o'clock, and we will be exploring dismantling and myth busting grants and bid writing, which will be really interesting because our applications for our community grants are live. So hopefully that will help you get some insight on how to make your bids writing stand out. We'll be joined by Ruth Beggar and as well as the Arts Council and Urban Flow Creative. So if you are one of those community organizations, a corporate partner, anybody who's interested in taking part in our community program, applications are now live and deadline is 31st to submit. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your evening and we shall see you on the 17th. Thank you so much, Aicha.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.